center table for making the throws that Davey, I think we need to get your names before I leave here to get Coach in for baseball. Those are pretty accurate throws here, you know. Listen, it's a great day to be here, great evening. It's a blessing to be here. I just want to thank y'all for being here tonight. And as I've started to learn, before I got here tonight, I was researching the Methodist home, and just what a tremendous blessing they provide young children into this community. So just very honored to be here tonight. I will share with you that I was on cloud nine when I got this invitation from Terry Harvin. I said, man, what a distinguished guest they've had here. And then I find out that Terry Harvin's speaking in a couple weeks. And I didn't feel quite as special. No, kidding aside. Terry's not here. He can't defend himself. Listen, I want to thank Joe. Good to see Joe Dupree here. Joe still looks in shape. I'm going to ask him if he's got that COVID year. Got a couple plays for you, Joe? All right. I always ask all the guys to get an extra COVID year. But it's great being here. I'll tell you also, too, Macon, Georgia, grew up in Rockinsville. My favorite band growing up was the Allman Brothers. And I haven't had a chance to tour the mansion yet, but it's obviously holds a deep place in my heart just for the love of music, and Macon's obviously has some great musicians. I'm going to touch on the coaching search tonight. I'm sure that's something y'all want to know about, and more so about just kind of tales from the recruiting path. I will share with you, I saw my good friend Jeff Dantzler signed a helmet, and I texted him tonight. I said, man, I've really arrived when I'm signing the same helmet as Jeff Dantzler. And he wrote me back a smart-like comment. But he did say that y'all like stories. So I will share with you, before we get into the search right now at Georgia Southern, I will share a story with you all from my last time at Mississippi State. It was the recruitment of Mike Leach. And the story could go for a while, and I'll keep it short. But I'll tell you, we were Mississippi State had just interviewed Joe Judge, who's now the Giants head coach. Flew up to Rhode Island to interview Joe Judge after being in Atlanta. And Joe, for a lot of people don't know, he was actually a Mississippi State grad. So he was a soccer student athlete. We thought we had a good chance of landing him. Well, that night goes, and we can't get in touch with Joe. The next morning, he's on the train to New York. And soon to be that afternoon, we didn't think it would happen this quick. The Giants offered him, and he accepted the role. We hadn't offered him yet, but we were getting close to potentially offering him. So we fly back to Starkville and have to kind of recalibrate, reconvene what's the plan. And we had talked to Mike Leach a couple of days prior. And so we've been trying to get with Mike, say, hey, Mike, this is Monday evening. Mike, we're going to come down tomorrow. He's in Key West. That's where he spends a lot of his time. Can't get in touch with Mike. Try his agent. Can't get in touch with him. So we said, you know what? We were blessed with a school plane. We're going to get on that plane, and we're just going to fly to Key West. And so we get on the plane, and when we do, land in Key West, get down there, still no Mike Leach. We're like, well, where are we going to go? So we go to this half raw oyster bar, which is a place close to his house he had told us about. As you can imagine, when you talk to Mike, he digresses pretty quick, and he'll go around the world in 30 minutes. And so we're setting up shop in Key West, and finally we get a hold of Mike, and our AD at the time, John Coleman, is still there. They said, it's Mike, we're down here in Key West. And Mike's first words were, go Bulldogs. And I said, well, Mike, that's great. We want to come see you. We flew down to see you. And Mike's first sentence was, well, I need to get my hair cut. And we're like, Mike, it doesn't matter about your hair. We're just going to come see you. So he says, all right, 30 minutes, meet us at the bike shop, a quarter mile up the road. So sure enough, we go to this bike shop. And you can imagine in Key West, there's bike shops all over the place. Like, we have the right place. So we show up, and sure enough, Mike comes strolling down. And so we actually did an interview for almost 2 hours on his pool deck in Key West. And you can imagine there's very few people that you'll hang on every word, but Mike was one of those. And so this search will not go down to Key West. I will share that with you. We're not going to Key West this time around. But I will share with you before we get into just kind of, a lot of times there's misperceptions of searches and things involved with that. Before I get to it, I want to share just real quick. I know Leonard touched on, being a Georgia native. It truly was a blessing to get back to my home state. Growing up in Athens in Oconee County, I was a mama's boy, didn't venture far from home. Had an opportunity to work for Claude Felton for 7 years at UGA. Claude's like a second dad to me. He means a lot to me. And finally got rid of me after 7 years, after being an undergrad and grad student, and worked in the business office for 4 more years. And in 2011, I remember going to Greg and Garrity and saying, hey, Greg, Arkansas is offering me a really good opportunity And I'll be honest with you, I was on the fence. And the good thing was I was engaged at the time. My wife now wanted me away from my mom and my family. So it was good to branch out a little bit, and that's a true story. And so, but Greg told me, he said, hey, Jared, this was really a deal breaker for me in a good way. He said, Jared, if you stay here, you've got to be resigned to do the same job in the next couple of years. And he said, I know where you're at. I was the same way when I was at Georgia and I went to Florida. And so Greg was a big part of that decision. Even though I only worked for him for 1 year, to go to Arkansas. And I'll tell you, really, 4 years in Arkansas was a blessing because really my wife and I grew together in Christ as a couple. That was really my takeaway from Arkansas. Didn't have anybody there, didn't know anybody there, and man, we just made some awesome friends and really grew a lot as both a person and professional. Go to Auburn, they were going to be there a while. My wife went to Auburn. I tell you, I don't tell this joke in Statesboro because I don't talk about Georgia much, but the one thing I always told people was my wife married up in one thing. So similar to Joe, I married up, I'll keep my coverage, I'll keep the stadium. The one thing she married up in was education. She went to Auburn. Now she didn't appreciate that joke very much. So I don't tell that joke very often. But no, we get to Auburn and we think we're going to be there a long time. Built a house. Our family's from Alabama, and man, we're so blessed and just love being there. Then I get recruited to Mississippi State a year and a half in by Scott Strickland. And I get there, he leaves 3 months later. And so I'm sitting there at 34 thinking, man, I just moved, awesome opportunity. He's a CFO for 35. Man, like what's going to happen next? And sure enough, 10 months later, I get promoted to be the COO as well, the deputy role. And that really prepared me for this opportunity, Georgia Southern. So when we named Mike Leach coming full circle to the head coaching role, it coincided with Tom Fineland leaving Georgia Southern. So I'm getting text messages that day, and my phone's beeping, and I'm thinking, well, I know who we hired. My friends knew I was involved with a search, and I'm getting a lot of messages, hey, Georgia Southern job's open. And Southern has always been a school, on my 5 schools, that if I ever have a chance to be an AD there, because it really fit how I grew up. My dad was career military and a civilian in the Navy Supply Corps school. My mom was a teacher. Georgia Southern to me has always been one of those schools when you line up for them, whether it be football, basketball, baseball, they're going to punch you in the mouth. And it's that blue collar, it's that grittiness, it's that doing more with less. And part of the reason why I came to Georgia Southern was to do more and more. We're just to be frank, we're trying to run this like an SEC school. That's all I know. And so we brought people in, the people we've had there, we're coaching them up, building them up, and obviously now we find ourselves in a football search. So one of the things I'm going to share with y'all a little bit is I think a lot of people are fascinated with search processes. And I'm telling you, they move quickly. Now this one's a little bit different because we've got more time. And so that's allowed a lot of conversations. I'll give you a case in point. I spent 2 weeks ago, I spent several days talking to pro scouts. And I talked to probably 10, 12 pro scouts. And you find out a lot of people don't realize this. Scouts are everywhere, and they're at all the practices. And you'd be amazed at what they pick up. So you can ask the pro scout, hey, tell me about this person, this person, this person. And they're there, they see it all. And they watch film, and they're very well informed. You talk to recruiting guys. Those recruiting guys know who's out on the road and who's not. And so you can have these additional conversations that normally you're not, traditionally going to an Atlanta, a Dallas, a Chicago, you're interviewing 8 to 12 people, you're sitting down, and then after that you're ranking them, and you're probably going to see your top 1 or 2 guys, and you're giving a MOU, a memorandum of understanding, you're signing, you're off to the races. It's a whirlwind. We've got time, so we're going to turn over every rock and every stone. Another thing people ask me about, what are search firms' roles? And there's a misconception out there that search firms are the ones doing the picking. They're not doing the picking. If they are, you have an AD that's in over his skis a little bit, in my opinion. What they can do, though, is they can help do a couple of things. One, as y'all know, we're Freedom of Information Act. There's a lot of ways people can FOIA stuff and find out things. For us, it keeps us off the grid and below the profile. Because a lot of people don't want to talk to you if it gets out that they're talking to you, right, for various reasons. So what they can do is back channel. They can back channel to a lot of people. They also, too, can keep conversations offline. So I'll give you a case in point. I like to call and find out what a grounds crew member feels about the football coach. Right? We'll call it, listen, I've even called a custodian before, it sounds crazy. But they know what's going on in the school. Well, if I call that person, they're going to know why I'm calling them Georgia Southern. So they can help with stuff like that, background checks. They also, too, can set up all the logistics. Because when you get in a search, You'll need a whole bunch of paper trail logistics of booking tickets and whatnot, because there's a lot of inquiring minds. So they provide a very valuable role, right? And here's the thing too, I've been in a search before at a former school I was at, where you get to your destination, and you might have 12 people in line, and it can cut down to 4 or 5 like that. Based on interest, money, timing, you name it. And so they can also help you compliment some guys, if you thought of this guy, you thought of that guy. So I just want to share that with you, because search firms play a valuable role, but not the role a lot of people think. And some people will talk about agents. And of course, Jimmy Sexton gets a bad rap at times. He's really good at what he does. Jimmy's really good at what he does. But here's the thing with the agents you have to understand. When you're going through these processes, one of the things that they'll talk to you about is relationships with guys that they know, that they represent. If you enter a search and you haven't done your homework, you're going to call with your pants down, to be honest with you. I mean, you've got to research it every year. You've got to stay on top. I don't subscribe to the notion that you have a short list for every role, because people change and come and going all the time. But when you're doing a football search, you better know who the players in the space are. Otherwise, you're going to leave it up to other people to tell you who those are. That's not a good spot to be in. Mention off-list references. I'll tell you something too. If for some of the coaches I look at in here, I know high school is probably similar, a little bit different, is you have to be ready for the speed of the search. So let me give you a great example. Let's see, that's 6 years ago, when in Starville, we're doing a search after Dan Mullen left. There was a very good coach at a group of 5 school who was playing in the championship game that week. And we offered to come down to see him, right? And on the school plane, he only had to do was literally leave his house, go down the road in 10 minutes. He said, hey, I'm not interested. I got a ball game prepared for it. Well, 12 hours later, he's calling back saying, hey, I already thought I'd like to meet with y'all. Well, at that point, we'd already moved on. And so the reason why I share that example is that sometimes you'll find with coaches, at least in this space, they're not ready for the speed at which these things go. These things go really, really fast. And so we do a lot of professional development in the summer with college coaches. We'll say, hey, listen, if you get mixed, if you get a call, you have to be decisive. And part of that is having that conversation with your spouse and others to know kind of where would you want to move, where would you not want to move. So those are just a couple of things from the road, and I'll open up here then with a Q&A, come and ask me what you want. The last thing I was going to share with you really quick is about what's going on in Statesboro. And I would share with y'all that you aren't familiar with Georgia Southern, at least recently. One of the biggest opportunities for us to get better is our infrastructure. And what I mean by that is, obviously Paulson Stadium has a ton of tradition. 6 national championships, Coach Russell. We have as much tradition in the last 39 years as any school in the country. And with all due respect, that's how I really feel. And when you look at where we are, referral recruiting grounds, we have a lot of things going for us. So one area we've been behind in is our infrastructure. And so the one thing I want to share with y'all is in the next 3 years, and this is not one of those, well, we'll wait and see how it, these are things in the pipeline. We have $70 million worth of projects coming in the next 3 years. $58.6 million brand new arena. So the brand new arena, the Convocation Center, is going to be a combination new arena, close to 5,000 seats, 4,500 to 5,000, depending upon the scope. Be our home of men's women's basketball. We'll also have concerts, have all types of things. That Georgia Southern owns that 100%. All the funding is from the state and Georgia Southern. It's a game changer. And so if y'all are familiar with 301, the bypass, right, in Lanier, which is right by the Paulson Stadium, it's right there at that intersection. It's much needed. It's going to be a tremendous blessing. It starts in April. It's an 18-month build-out. The other piece we're raising money for right now is a brand new indoor facility for football. For y'all, especially those football coaches, you know how valuable practice time is during the week. And when you've got 120 plus guys, plus staff, coaches, and you going inside a one-court arena, you don't get a lot of work done. And so for us, we've missed 18 practices last year, before 22 practices. And those practice missed times accumulate over time. So we're already off to a fast start. Raised $3 million in 7 months. And so we've got to get close to the $4.5, $5 million mark to break ground on that and go to the foundation for approval. So the reason why I'm sharing that with you is the vision for Georgia Southern is very ambitious. That we have a lot of intangibles that you can't buy. Money can't buy tradition and history and whatnot. But we are going to get better in infrastructure. And so that's one of the things I'm really excited about. And with this hire, I'm very confident we're going to hit a home run, that our best days are ahead. So, listen, I can't speak to you enough just how what a blessing it is to be here tonight. I'm glad to answer any questions you have. I didn't want to bore you with different things going on, but I did want to share just some stories that I thought you find interesting. With that, I'll take any questions you have.
coaching search? Are you tied into a certain type of offense, or are you flexible, or who you looking for?
Yeah, the question was, if y'all can hear, is are we tied into a certain style of offense? The answer is no. Number one thing that we're looking for is a true CEO, and people think, well, that's corporate talk. No, it's not corporate talk. It really is a person who understands the demands, challenges, and opportunities of the head coach in the Sun Belt, which in my opinion is the best group of 5 league in the country right now. And so, I know in the past and in discussions that they've been leading with that potentially. I have a ton of respect for triple option, but we haven't run triple option since 13. If you really want to get down to the minutia, we haven't run triple options since Monken left, Coach Monken left. So we've run iterations of it. And so for us, we're trying to find someone who's the best coach for the offensive and the defensive, and there's different ways to quantify that. But I just think if you go into it with a predetermined offense, you're limiting yourself to all. There's a lot of great coaches out there, a lot of different coach parts, all parts of the country, all different types of backgrounds. The goal is to cast a wide net and then really kind of drill it in from there. It's a good question. Yes, sir.
Is there any chance at all you can hire Dan Mullen from Florida?
You heard when I previously worked at Mississippi State, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I've worked with Dan before. It's good enough. I respect Dan, but I'm sure he'll do a good job before.
I'm not.
Yes, sir.
With all the reshuffling of conferences, do you see the Sun Belt being affected by that?
Yes, sir. So, again, I'll keep repeating the questions. I apologize for being redundant, but he asked, the gentleman asked about the conference realignment. Yes, sir. I think the Sun Belt, I think two's most probable. In fact, I just got a text message about the American. What's interesting about the American is, and a lot of these realignments are driven by TV dollars. I know it's not a surprise for y'all. It's all about viewership and TV dollars. That's why these regionality pieces got out the door. I think the American's going to potentially add up to 16 to go from 8 to 14. A little bit of those schools are looking to go to American. They're kind of buying the fool's gold. Here's what I mean by that. The schools that have left the American comprise 80% of the viewership in football. So you're sitting there and you have a commissioner that says, hey, our distribution is not going to change much, and I'm sitting there thinking the math doesn't work that way, right? And so if you look at their distribution, even though it's more than the Sun Belt, it's going to come down substantially. So for us, it's a question where I think we'll have 2 schools. I'm not opposed to adding 4 because what I think you can end up doing is kind of the model the SEC's currently in, an Eastern and Western division with some crossovers, and you cut down your travel time. So any revenue share distribution decrease could be offset with travel decrease in costs. So the 2 is where I think we land, and I think after that it could be potentially more down the road. The 2 is probably most probable. But I think the dominoes have to fall. The Americans kind of what's going the way on.
Any particular challenges you see at a school like Georgia Southern with the name, image, and likeness?
Yes, the question was any challenges at Georgia Southern about name, image, likeness. It's interesting having this conversation on the way up here. Name, image, likeness is a piece for us. We've embraced it. Our job is to educate student athletes. Our job is not to arrange deals. But what we're seeing at Georgia Southern is a lot different than we've seen in Athens or in Auburn and Tuscaloosa. So a couple of things that I think are going to kind of come out of this, and there's been some talk about what is guess what, we're 5 months in, 4 or 5 months in NIL, is what's going to happen long-term wise. Well, it's going to continue to increase and grow. But here's what I think, a couple things that I'm picking up on. One, we have to remember, if you have a company or a business, you're investing in 18 and 22-year-olds. They're going to make mistakes. If everybody in this room that was 18 and 22-year-olds, I know social media wasn't around, and probably, for God's sake, it was a good reason it wasn't around when y'all were in college. Right? Probably did a lot of things you don't want on social media. But I would share with you, I think when you're investing in 18 and 22-year-olds, they're going to make mistakes. You're also going to have instances this year where people haven't played, and they got $100,000+ deals. The last thing, too, is I think some companies are sitting there saying, we haven't gone through a transfer portal cycle yet. So you think about a transfer portal, there's guys going in mid-year, but at the end of the year, you'll see a pretty big rush. And at one point last year, I don't know if you know this, 30% of all college basketball student athletes are in the portal. 30%. And that's not an exaggeration, that's a approximate percentage. So what I think will happen after all these transfers is people are gonna sit there and say, hey, at the end of the day, loyalty-wise, my school's not going anywhere. And so I'm not saying that school and student athletes are gonna be, waging battle over dollars, but there are people that are investing in both. And that's something that'd be interesting how the market moves from there, because it is the free market, and they can decide on that. So our challenge is on more education and trying to help them understand the responsibility of that, which is no different, but we're not inundated with the type of six-figure deals that some of the schools are.
Future Power 5 conference schedules.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think you must have read my notes today, because I was working on that. That was good. And here's what's interesting is scheduling here in the last couple of months has really come to a stop. Because what you've got, some schools are still out there. I'm actually trying to schedule, I've got a game in 25 I'm trying to field, and it's 20, I think it's 28, 29, and 31, 32. So we're out a good bit. But what's happened now with all these alliances, some of the Power 5 schools have stopped scheduling until the spring. And so that's problematic a little bit. I know we're going on this, we talked about earlier, but a lot of the SEC schools are waiting on guidance from the Southeastern Conference office, just relevant to the TV deal. So, because what you're going to probably happen is SEC has to decide how many games it's going to. My guess is, I don't have a dog in the fight, I'm not around those discussions anymore, my guess is 9. I think last year you look at 10 games is too much. You talk to people in those schools. I think 9 is a sweet spot. So you might say, well, how does that impact a school like Georgia Southern? Well, because if you think about Power 5 schools, traditionally in the SEC, play 8, right? 8 Power 5 games, conference games, right? Then you're going to have 4 other games. Those games are usually comprised of a rival, 2 group of 5s, and an FCS. So what happens is they go to 9 games, right? And you've already got 4 teams contracted. You're one too many. You're going to kick that team down the road or pay a penalty for cutting off that contract. So there's a lot of jockeying going on right now. And once they decide on how many games as the season go with, then I think you'll see some more games scheduled. So I would anticipate this spring to have a decision on that. But I'm just giving my opinion. I don't know. Yes, sir.
During Coach Russell's days, there wasn't a whole lot of other schools that played football in the state of Georgia. Like Georgia Tech and Georgia, he got the cream of the crop. I mean, now that you've got so many other teams in Georgia, do y'all not get the players y'all once did, or how's that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not probably the best one to ask just because I've been there a year and a half. I will tell you, you're right. There's been more schools, some of the directional schools in Florida. There's a lot of schools that have popped up since then. What I would tell you is, well, I can't speak to other schools recruiting. For us, I mean, I look at recruiting, I-20 down south is being unbelievable. In fact, it reminds me of a lot when I was in Mississippi. The Delta got overlooked a lot, right? And so it's the same thing low south of I-20. There's unbelievable, just like here in Macon and across, there's unbelievable student athletes all across the state. My opinion, quite frankly, is you have to be relentless in recruiting. And so much of that's effort. So some people say, well, gosh, fundraising, what tricks there's no tricks of the trade. You have to be genuine, you have to bust your tail. And so recruiting-wise, yeah, has it made it more difficult? Probably. But at the end of the day, Georgia Southern's a destination, at least I feel it is. And so we've got to continue this new staff to make sure they have all the resources they need to be successful. And here's the last thing I'll share with you too. When we look at our interstate system, this came in handy last year, just being on the road so much. When you have I-16, I-95, and obviously 75, you draw a 5-hour radius around Statesboro. You don't have to fly anywhere. And so to me, I don't really subscribe to the notion that just because there's more schools or more recruiting's more saturated now, I don't believe in that, because those schools don't have our tradition or our resources. That's just being candid with us. Yes, sir.
How do you balance your football responsibilities with all the other schools, or all the other sports that you're responsible for?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was saying earlier to Bill over there that football is the engine, the carburetor, the transmission, the water pump. It's everything, especially from a revenue standpoint, sustainability standpoint. But I would also share with you too that when you're in the SEC for 20 years like I was, you want to be good in everything. And I see a lot of SEC shirts in here, right? And you look at it, no offense to Georgia Tech, sorry, but Sorry, it's not a joke. A long time ago in the SEC though. But when you think about the SEC, you want to be successful in everything, and that's really kind of our approach to stuff. And so we want to be good in every sport, and so that's just that competitive drive. So you'd be amazed at showing up at a practice or a competition, whatever the sport is outside of football. The student athletes genuinely care for it, and you really feel like they feel appreciated. It makes you want to help them more and more. So it's easy to get lost in football, but I have 400 student athletes that I help oversee, so I want to make sure all of them feel attended to and inclusive. So. Yeah, the question was the enrollment. I think we're 27,089 students. Yeah, we'll be at 27.5 next year, number 28, I think, in 2 years. Last year during the pandemic, we grew 3.5% enrollment, which is really, really impressive. And that's not with lower standards or anything. That's why that corridor between Savannah and Statesboro continues to be really expansive in terms of all the technology and businesses coming. And so that's why when we talk to our student athletes about, we have 141 degree programs at Georgia Southern, you can really be there and take anything. And I think that makes us a really good option for high school student athletes. Yes, sir.
Just a point. My senior year at University of Georgia was 14,000.
14,000? Wow. So how many years ago was that? No, see, he took the bait. I was asking that. He took the bait. 68? How about that? No one's asking who the coach is going to be. That was a good, I got to do the whole thing. Yeah. I want to still know, Joe, you getting to come back one more season? I'm coming back to you. You're better halfway behind, what you?
How quickly do you think that announcement's coming?
I would tell you the goal is, the early sign-up period has changed the whole game of hiring coaches. Because whatever mid-December, December 15th, 16th, 14th, whatever that date is, you've got a really compressed timeline. And since that was implemented, I think, was it 17 was the first sign-up period, I think, we had the early sign-up period. It used to be like, for example, I remember being a freshman in Athens and got a call over Christmas, and it was Claude saying, hey, Glenn Mason's going to be named coach, come to the Busmere building. Where's Glenn Mason if y'all are Georgia alums back out? And Coach Rick came, and that was at the end of December, because all the sign here was in mid-February. Well, now it's changed, so part of the reason, again, there's a lot of reasons why we made the decision we did, but a lot of that is going to be to get someone here as soon as we can. Now, the reality of the situation, if not all the coaches, are all going to have teams playing through that last week of Thanksgiving, Saturday. So the goal is to have someone here as soon as you can after Thanksgiving that can come in, do the press conference, and hit the ground running for 2 weeks or so, 3.5 weeks. Because it's a blitz. And listen, our class is not going to be as big this year because of the COVID. You've got, and this is one thing y'all probably talked about, Joe, your high school student athletes, but with that COVID year, that 5th year, tongue in cheek with Joe, like, the reality is it's made the roster piece management really difficult for college coaches. Because what you've got, you're trying to sit there and project out who's going to be back next year, who you not want back, which is an honest question to ask. And then on top of that, you've got student athletes trying to compete for a spot on a roster that has 5 classes and 4 years of scholarships, which is why the expansion from 25 counters to 32 this year for football is really, really important. Because what ends up happening, if you have 25 counters in football, right? Let's say you lose 5 transfers a year, and you're stuck at 25. Over 4 years, you're 20 people short potentially in scholarships. And that's why this transfer portal piece has been so interesting, because if they're not going to allow help with counters, and you're stuck at 25, you can be in a roster that doesn't have the depth that you want. And then again, to the point of high schoolers, that's where, I would recommend strongly for current high schoolers, if you have a bird in the hand, you need to take it, because scholarships, a lot of people aren't going to be in the market the next 2-3 years for as many scholarship opportunities as normal, just because of the 5th year pieces come in.
Year last.
I guess it'll be 4 more, I guess it'll be the next 4 years.
So you were a freshman last fall?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
fall into the,
correct, yeah, so all the freshmen last fall have 5 seasons of competition. So, yes, sir.
If you can answer, what's the salary of the head coach and a second part of the season? Do
more and dynamic assistant coaches that are around the country that are looking to move up to
Yeah.
head coaches? Is that more of your scope or?
Yes, our first question, Chad was at 680, we'll be north of that. Not being evasive, I don't know the number yet, because I'll tell you what I've always done. Whenever we've hired a staff or coach that obviously has a staff, I've always, this is a little light from my finance background, I've always gone to the coach and say, all right, here's the entire salary pool for you and these individuals. So I'll take basketball. It's a little easier just because the staff's small. When I hired Brian Berg last year, I said, Brian, this is the pool for you, your 3 assistant coaches, your director of ops, and a video person. All right, I feel comfortable paying you up to X amount, but you pick your salary. Now, for some of the coaches here, you're like, man, I get to pick my salary. I'm sure y'all like, man, that's great. But here's what you end up finding out. You find out pretty quickly who puts a value on their assistants and their staff. And I'll tell you, I'm blessed that Georgia Southern, Brian Berg was one of the top 5 assistants in the country at Texas Tech in the Final Four. He was making $305,000. He took a $75K pay cut to come to Southern, and he gave it to his staff. Now tell me he doesn't see the big picture, right? Tell me he doesn't see the big picture when we have success at Southern, right? We want to keep him as long as we can. But if a school comes in and offers a 10 or 12 multiple what you're making in an annualized salary, it's hard to turn it down. And so that's why I've always given the coaches, is sometimes coaches are creative. And I love coaches, but they're really creative, right? And they sometimes they'll say, well, hey, if I had known I could have changed my salary, I would have done it and hired this person. Well, we have those discussions on the front end. And so part of that would be, so we'll be north of 680, but I don't know what the number is. As far as fit, listen, it's interesting. I'll give you an analogy. So in athletics for a long time, it was hired the hot young fundraiser. Well, this industry's got much more complex, a lot more complex. Not that fundraisers aren't well suited for that, but I think it's not a business, but it's business principles. And what you're seeing with some of the hires is more of a business acumen, operations acumen. I think there's akin to that a little bit in football right now, is that for a long time it's been the hot offensive coordinator. And percentage-wise, they've done better, but they've also had more opportunities. And so what you're starting to see, though, is people saying, all right, look at the Sam Pittman example. And I know Arkansas took it on the chin this past weekend. But Sam's had success. And so what I think what you're going to see, at least for us, is I'm trying to look at every option. I think you have FCS coaches, you have Power 5 OCs, Power 5 DCs. You're going to have people that were former head coaches of Power 5. I mean, you have the whole spectrum. And I think you have to do that. Otherwise, you have confirmation bias. And I love analytics and I love numbers, but they only tell part of the story. And so you've got to make sure you're looking at everything. And the last thing I'll share with you too is, you've got to do your homework on people. There's a couple of hot names right now, coordinators, Power 5. They come up a lot, but they were at a previous institution that had some serious concerns. And I'll share with you, like just from a value moral standpoint, I'm not going to compromise my values and school's values and just say, well, heck with it, we want to win football games. Well, I don't believe it. I want to win as much as anybody, but I'm not putting my head down at night, worried about what's going on behind the scenes. And so I think you have to make a conscious decision on that. Because there's a lot of good coaches out there, but you want to sign up for the baggage, and I personally don't. There's too many good head coaches out there that do things the right way.